Last summer, I decided to take a road trip. After a long and stressful period, I needed some time alone, some peace. I came across a place on the map that seemed perfect for a getaway. A small town that seemed so obscure that it didn't even show up on most maps. It had no reviews online, no real information other than its name. For me, that was the perfect escape, a place untouched, forgotten by the world. The drive was longer than I expected. As I got further away from the city, the paved roads gradually turned into narrow, bumpy paths surrounded by thick trees. Still, I pushed on, convinced that this strange little town was my destination. For some reason, the road leading to it felt isolated, like it was designed to keep people out. But after a few hours of driving, I spotted a sign. It read, Karaki's Town. It was a strange name, and the town didn't look like anything I expected. It seemed deserted. The houses looked as though they hadn't been lived in for years, yet they weren't run down either. The windows were dusty, and the doors were shut tightly. It was as though time had forgotten this place. But there was something eerie about it, something off in the air. The trees were thicker here, blocking out most of the sunlight, giving everything a muted and dark vibe. The silence was almost suffocating, broken only by the sound of my tires rolling over the gravel road. I drove deeper into the town, looking for some sign of life. Eventually, I came across a small square, and there were a few people standing around. They didn't move much, just stood there, staring at me. Their faces were blank, their eyes fixed on my car. It made my skin crawl. As I parked, one of the older men approached my car. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something that made me feel like I shouldn't be here. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a raspy voice. "This place, it's not meant for people like you." I wasn't sure what he meant, but I just smiled politely. "Why is that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Because when the sun sets, the town changes," he whispered. "You don't go out after dark. You'll understand soon enough." At first, I thought it was just an odd superstition, one of those small-town legends or warnings to keep outsiders from coming back. But his tone, his urgency, made me pause. Maybe there was more to this place than I realized. I decided to explore the town a bit. It was eerily quiet. Not a single car passed by, and the houses, while still standing, seemed frozen in time. Old shops lined the main street, but none of them were open. The streets were completely empty, and everything felt off, like a place forgotten by the world. Around dusk, I decided to find somewhere to stay the night. As I looked for a place to rest, the man's warning kept echoing in my mind. But I brushed it off as superstition, something harmless. Still, there was an odd chill in the air, and even though the weather was warm, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. By the time night had fallen, Karaki's town felt like a different world. The silence deepened, and an overwhelming sense of isolation enveloped the town. The only light came from the pale glow of the moon, barely able to cut through the thick darkness. The wind rustled the leaves in a haunting way, and I could almost hear whispers, soft murmurs, just beyond my hearing. I was standing on the street corner when I noticed something odd. A figure standing by one of the houses, watching me. It was hard to make out the details, but something about the way they stood there, motionless, unblinking, made my skin crawl. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the longer I stared, the more unsettled I became. I quickly turned away, walking briskly back to my car. But then I heard something. A soft whisper, so faint at first that I thought I had imagined it. It was coming from all around me, from the shadows. I tried to ignore it, but it grew louder and clearer, words that didn't quite make sense. I was about to turn around when I saw it, another figure, emerging from the darkness. And then another. They were slowly approaching, their faces hidden in shadow, their movements unnaturally slow. Suddenly, the whispers became clearer, louder, almost deafening. They were speaking in a language I didn't recognize, words I couldn't understand, but there was something chilling in the tone. Panic rose in my chest. I turned and ran, my feet pounding the pavement as the whispers followed me, growing louder with every step. I didn't stop until I reached my car and locked the doors. I sat in my car, breathing heavily, trying to calm my racing heart. Was I just imagining things? Could it be that my mind was playing tricks on me? Or was there something more sinister at play here? I knew one thing for sure, I had to leave. I didn't know what was going on, but I felt trapped, like the town itself was closing in on me. The more I tried to leave, the more the whispers followed me, the more the shadows crept closer. I sat in my car for a while, not daring to move. But I knew that I had to leave this place before it was too late. Little did I know that my curiosity had already set in motion something much darker than I had anticipated. The feeling of being watched never left me. Even as I sat in the car, staring out through the windshield, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sensation that someone, was just beyond the edge of the trees, waiting for me to make a move. The whispers from before had died down, but they left a lingering echo in my mind. I couldn't quite place it, but it was as if the town itself was a living, breathing entity. It had eyes, and it had a voice, and it wasn't done with me yet. I glanced at my phone, but there was no signal. Of course. The one time I needed to reach out for help, I was stuck in a place that seemed to be cut off from the rest of the world. I checked the map again. The road I had come in on didn't even appear to be on it, and every turn I'd taken in the past hour had led me deeper into the town, further away from any known civilization. Panic started to creep in, but I couldn't let it consume me. I had to figure out what was going on. The night seemed to grow colder as the minutes passed. I couldn't stay in the car forever. The longer I remained here, the more trapped I felt. I had to find a place to stay, a way out, anything. I started the car, the engine humming softly in the stillness of the night. But before I could shift into gear and leave, I saw something that made my heart stop. A shadow, moving quickly across the street, just beyond the glow of the headlights. It was tall, almost unnaturally so, and it moved with an eerie grace. I couldn't make out any details at first, but the way it moved felt wrong. My body tensed, and every instinct told me to leave, now. But my feet refused to press the accelerator. It was like I was paralyzed, frozen in place by something I couldn't explain. I watched, horrified, as the shadow drew closer, closer to my car. I could feel my breath catch in my throat, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The figure stopped, just outside the window, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something move in the darkness, a face? Or was it just a trick of the light? I couldn't be sure. But the air around me felt thick, suffocating, like the town was pressing in, wanting to consume me whole. Suddenly, the figure began to move again, walking slowly away from my car, vanishing into the shadows. I didn't wait to see where it went. Without thinking, I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, sending the car speeding down the street, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of town, but as I turned the corner to leave, the road ahead of me seemed to disappear. There was no exit. It was as if the town itself had swallowed it up. The streets were endless, looping back in on themselves. I tried again and again, but each time I came back to the same place, to the same dead end. The whispers returned, louder this time, like the town itself was laughing at my futile attempts to escape. I realized then that I wasn't just lost. I was trapped. The cold air pressed in from all sides, and I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest, suffocating me. I had no choice but to head back toward the town square. I needed help. I needed answers. I had to find someone who could explain what was happening before I lost my sanity completely. I parked the car near the same square I had seen earlier. It was eerily quiet again, the only sound being the soft rustling of the trees. As I stepped out of the car, I felt the familiar chill that had been haunting me all day. The people in the town, those few I had seen earlier, were nowhere to be found now. It was as though they had all disappeared into thin air, leaving me alone in this desolate place. My footsteps echoed through the square, the sound unsettlingly loud against the silence. The buildings around me seemed to loom, their facades dark and oppressive, their windows like dead eyes watching me. I knew I had to keep moving, but I didn't know where to go. I was beginning to feel the pressure building in my chest, the same sensation I had felt when I first arrived. The town wasn't just a place, it was something alive, something sentient. And it was angry. I wandered deeper into the town, my breath shallow as I passed by old shops and deserted houses. I felt like a trespasser, intruding on a place that didn't want me there, a place that would make me pay for my curiosity. I wasn't sure how long I'd been walking, but eventually, I came across a small tavern near the edge of town. The light inside flickered faintly through the windows, casting strange shadows against the walls. I stepped inside. The room was dim, the air thick with the smell of old wood and smoke. A fire crackled in the corner, casting flickering light over the walls. There were only a few people inside, strange, quiet figures hunched over their drinks. They didn't look up as I entered, their eyes glazed, their expressions blank. The bartender, an older man with a grizzled face, looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You shouldn't be here, miss," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You've seen it, haven't you?" I didn't have to ask what he meant. I nodded slowly, the fear rising in me again. What is happening here? What is this place? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he poured a drink into a glass and set it in front of me. "There's a reason no one leaves once they come. You can't outrun it, and you can't hide from it. This town, it has a way of keeping you. The sooner you accept that, the easier it'll be." I stared at him, confused. "But what do you mean? What is this place? What's happening?" He looked at me then, his eyes wide, almost too wide. "The town was cursed long ago. People who came here stayed too long. They never left. And now, the town keeps you here. It takes your soul. You can't leave. The longer you stay, the more you become part of it." I shuddered. It didn't make sense. But somehow, it did. I felt it now, the pressure, the weight, the pull of this place. I had already been here too long, and the town wasn't going to let me go. As if on cue, I heard something in the distance. A faint sound, barely perceptible at first. It was the whispering again. The voices. And then, the lights flickered and went out. The whispers became louder, surrounding me. I could feel the darkness closing in, could almost see the figures in the shadows, watching me, waiting for me. I stood, my heart pounding in my chest. What do I do? I asked, desperate for answers. But the bartender was gone. The tavern was empty, the voices now surrounding me like a thick fog. I didn't have much time. The town had already begun to claim me, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could fight it. The whispers had grown louder, like a swarm of invisible insects buzzing around my head. They filled my ears, drowning out everything else, but not the sense of impending doom that settled deep in my bones. The tavern was dark now, the warmth of the fire long gone, replaced by a suffocating cold that crept up my spine and spread through my limbs. I stumbled back, the hairs on my neck standing on end as the door to the tavern slammed shut behind me. The suddenness of the sound made me jump, my heart racing. I was alone now. Completely alone. The only light came from the weak glow of the street lamps outside, casting long, flickering shadows across the floor. The sounds of the town, those soft whispers, seemed to close in from all sides. It wasn't just the wind or the trees. It was the town itself, reaching out, trying to pull me into its web. And no matter how much I wanted to leave, I could feel the pull. The pull of the town, its suffocating grip wrapping around me. I had to escape. But the more I tried to move, the more the air felt heavy, as if something was forcing me to stay, trapping me in the streets. I stumbled toward the door, only to find it locked. Panicking, I turned to the windows, but they were sealed tight, and no matter how hard I pushed or banged against the glass, they wouldn't budge. I wasn't getting out. In a frenzy, I dashed toward the back of the tavern, where a narrow, dimly lit hallway stretched into the darkness. The whispers seemed to echo from that direction, getting louder the closer I got. I reached the end of the hallway, where an old door stood ajar, beckoning me like the mouth of a dark cave. Without thinking, I stepped through it. The room beyond was a small, dank cellar. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in strange symbols, etched into the stone with a crude, desperate hand. My heart skipped a beat. The symbols were unlike anything I'd ever seen before, but I recognized their meaning. They were warnings, etched by someone who had tried to stop whatever dark force had taken root in this town. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang, trapping me inside. The whispers had now turned into low murmurs, indistinguishable but urgent. My breathing quickened as I backed away from the door, eyes scanning the room for any way out. And then, I saw it. At the far corner of the room, a dusty old chest stood against the wall, half hidden in the shadows. I hesitated for a moment, but something, an instinct, maybe, compelled me to approach it. The closer I got, the more the whispers seemed to grow, swirling around me like an angry storm. I crouched down and opened the chest. Inside, I found an old journal. The leather was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with age. I flipped it open, my eyes scanning the scrawled words. As I read, I felt my stomach drop. The journal belonged to the original settlers of the town. They had come to the area to escape from something ancient and evil that had followed them. But they hadn't been able to escape. The curse had already taken root in the land, and by the time they realized the danger, it was too late. The journal detailed the ritual that had been performed to bind the curse to the town, but it was incomplete. There was no clear explanation of how to break the curse. It was as if the writer had been interrupted, or perhaps, driven mad by what they had discovered. I slammed the journal shut, my mind racing. The whispers had now turned into full-blown voices. Their words were distorted, like they were coming from deep within the earth, or from the mouths of those long dead. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew, they knew I had read the journal. And now they wanted me to join them. I spun around, my eyes frantically searching for a way out. The room seemed to grow darker, the air colder. I could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. There was no escaping this. The town had claimed me, and it wasn't going to let me go without a fight. I heard the door behind me creak open, and I spun to face the shadowy figure that stepped into the room. It was one of the townspeople. I could tell by the faded, threadbare clothes they wore, but their face was hidden in the shadows. They were motionless, watching me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. The whispers seemed to come from them, from within them. Why are you doing this? I whispered, my voice shaking as I backed away. The figure didn't respond. Instead, they reached forward, their hand outstretched, fingers twitching like a puppet on a string. In that moment, I knew. They were part of the curse. They had never left, never escaped. They were trapped here, just like me. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get out. The figure's footsteps followed me, their whispers growing louder as they closed in. I didn't look back. I ran down the hallway, through the tavern, and out the front door, bursting into the night air. The streets of the town seemed to stretch on forever, endless and confusing. The shadows twisted and curled, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My only goal now was to escape. But as I reached the outskirts of the town, I realized something horrifying. The landscape had changed. The roads no longer led to the highway. The trees were thicker now, more oppressive, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting long, jagged shadows across the land. The town had shifted, its boundaries expanding, closing in on me. I was no longer at the edge of the town. I was at its center, and I knew, there was no way out. I collapsed to my knees, exhausted and terrified. My hands shook, and my breath came in ragged gasps. The whispers were louder now, their words clearer. They were all around me, swirling like a storm. You shouldn't have come, the voices whispered in unison. Now you belong to us. I looked up, my eyes wide with terror as the figure from the tavern stepped out of the shadows. The town had claimed me, and now there was no escape. The curse had taken root, and I was its newest victim. And as the darkness closed in around me, I realized with a chilling certainty, the town had won.